What's up, guys? Of course, what you'll be seeing today is a breakdown and review of the exotic hand cannon in Destiny called Hawkmoon. It's an exclusive to PlayStation, which I'm not a big fan of exclusives at all, so I think it's kind of bullshit. And that's coming from a PlayStation user. So, unfortunately, that's the case. Though rare, there's plenty of ways to get it, and that's including raid chests, raid checkpoints like Atheon and Crota, through Nightfalls, which is where I got it, Vanguard strikes, and even in the Crucible. And as I'll explain, this weapon has a lot of luck to it, and that's a literal statement. The rough stats from Destiny DB state that this weapon starts with a 260 base damage and increases all the way to a max of 331 when you're done with the upgrades. You're going to need Glimmer weapon parts and Ascendant energy to upgrade it, and some other form, whether it be Relic Iron or Spirit Bloom, which might be dependent on your weapon. The fire rate is actually 22%. It has an impact rating of 81, which is very high. A range of 38, which actually can be increased. A stability rating of 51. A reload percent of 39, which again, paired with a gunsling and hunter, would make that go even faster. And a starting magazine size of 13, which is incredibly high for a hand cannon. So based on the preliminary look at the stats alone, minus the perks, this thing hits hard and fast. And I mean, it hits very hard. In terms of PvP damage output, this thing hits for 63 damage on non-critical shots and 94 on headshots, and that's before the approximate 30% damage bonuses, and there's 3 of them when the weapon's fully upgraded that you can get to, and I'll address that shortly. If you manage to get lucky and get one of the headshots, or get a headshot with one of the 3 possible multipliers, and they can stack to each bullet, it hits for 126 damage, which is actually the most common. The odds of you landing, which would be a one-shot shot immediately in the Crucible, of like a bullet having 3 damage buffs to it, though, is very, very uncommon, so I wouldn't base my odds on getting those very often. With regard to the skill tree, because there's an exotic, all Hawkmoons in existence do not have variation. You have 3 clear options in terms of the barrels: Accurized Ballistics, which is the stock one, which increases impact and makes recoil more manageable, but as the trade-off, makes range a bit shorter and increases that recoil. The second is Field Choke, which boosts range and impact, but of course adds more recoil. And lastly, Aggressive Ballistics, which produces predictable and more controllable recoil, and it actually increases impact. But it increases recoil and actually reduces range slightly. So if you can manage the slightly increased recoil, I'd go for Aggressive Ballistics, but of course the choice is up to you. With regard to breaking down the skill tree, the most important perk is Luck in the Chamber, which, as I alluded to earlier, makes one random bullet in that 13 magazine size deal considerable bonus damage. And I've read from multiple sources that apparently it's around 30%, somewhere between 30 to 33, maybe exactly 33. The next 3 perks which you'll have a choice over are Hammer Forge, which increases range and accuracy, which is the one I use. The second one's Quick Draw, which increases weapon draw speed. I feel if you're going to use this perk at all, the best place to do it is, of course, in the Crucible, where quickness is paramount. And lastly is Speed Reload, which does exactly what it says. That's another one you can choose for the Crucible too. The last perk of note is called Holding Aces, which in addition to Luck in the Chamber, which gives you 1, Holding Aces gives you another 2 bullets of the 13 that add additional bonus damage. And yes, like I said earlier, bullet damage bonuses can stack, so you can get all 3 luck damage stack onto 1 bullet in the 13 round. And I said, although it's extremely improbable, you can actually have all 3 stack on 1, and it would be an insta-gib one shot in the Crucible. And the last 5 perks are damage upgrades. With regard to my overall impressions, to no one's surprise, this thing is both a monster in PvE and PvP. The luck perks are just gravy added on, like to the turkey, I guess, to finish the reference. But yeah, this thing doesn't need any of these luck perks alone to stand out and be successful, but that's adding 30% damage is icing on the cake, another one. The range buff with Hammer Forged makes it even more dangerous and even more scary. You can one-shot just about any non-heroic or yellow bar enemy below 32, providing it's a critical hit. It can handle itself well in nearly every single PvE situation, but using it in a hard mode raid, or Crota's hard mode raid, isn't really a bona fide absolutely you should, though you absolutely can if you're skilled enough. It's more situational. You should use your better judgment and discretion before bringing it in certain areas where, like, say if you went into the abyss of hard mode raid, you're gonna be overrun. I don't care if if you're the best Hawkmoon user out there. Just too many for you. And the only downside to it, of course, is because it doesn't have the perk Firefly, which Fatebringer has, and obliterates just about everything beside the guy you just hit in the face with your weapon. And the fact that it doesn't have a main element associated with it, such as Arc, like especially for Nightfalls. You might be better with Fatebringer in like swarm situations like the raid or in the Nightfall instead of Hawkmoon, but that's really nitpicking for problems. In PvP, it's probably the best weapon in the crew. I put it in the top 2 or 3 for top Crucible weapons in the game. Especially if you're good with hand cannons, you're going to want this one. There is, of course, some luck associated with the perks, like I said, that make 3 of the 13 rounds a bonus damage, or possibly even 1. But each round fired deals incredible damage anyway, and at worst, this weapon is a 3-shot kill at range. It's entirely possible to get 2 hits, and like I said earlier, even 1 hit because of the bonus damages stacking. It has great range, a great fire rate, a large magazine size, so you won't have to do a ton of reloading, but it does have a reload buff, and paired with a Gunslinging Hunter, which if you hit a lot of headshots with, especially in PvE, this thing's going to reload so fast with its already huge pluses. It's a monster in PvP and PvE, and that's my overall thoughts on it. To sum up, it can be effective in PvE and PvP, but the only downside to it is of course, that in Nightfall situations, you're probably going to want the element associated with the buff, with the burn, and in Fatebringer, in situations where you're probably going to be swarmed by multiple people, you're better off with a weapon or a hand cannon that has Firefly. But that's nitpicking. It's a monster on its own. Have a good one, YouTube.